Hello, my name is Gabriel. I'm a martial artist, a martial arts instructor, and a stuntman in the film industry. Today I want to talk about my martial arts journey. I want to talk about where it all began. I want to sort of break down each section of my life and my journey within the context of martial arts so people can get a better idea of how I came to live this lifestyle and make martial arts my career. But also, if people can relate to my story, maybe I have something to say that might contribute to somebody else's life and might provide some insight for people. To talk about the beginning of my journey, I actually need to talk about my father. My father's name is Luis Ruan, and he was born in National City in San Diego. The rougher part of town, there's a lot of gangs. But from the age of 12, my dad started training in martial arts. He started training in karate. The style he trained in was Wadakai karate, and he learned from Sensei Murphy and Sensei Terry Crook, as well as Chicken Gabriel in San Diego. And these are very legitimate martial artists and martial arts masters. He was training it when people were sparring full contact. You learned self-defense, you learned how to fight. He really fell in love with martial arts during that time, and also it kept him out of trouble. He trained till he was about 20 years old in karate. He was also a competitive runner, so he would mix in his training with running. So he would run, even getting ready for his brown belt test. He had to do a kumite, a 10-man kumite, so it's one guy right after the other. My dad had to train for that, and growing up, my dad used to talk to me about how much that brown belt testing experience meant for him. The running, the training every day, reviewing kata. My dad loved martial arts. He loved martial arts movies. He grew up also watching Bruce Lee movies. My dad used to show me movies like Enter the Dragon. His favorite line was when Jim Kelly told Han,
"Man, you come right out of a comic book."
He still quotes it to this day, Just as a little kid, my dad instilled a lot of martial arts within us. He used to get me and my brother, and he would teach us how to block and punch and kick. Those are really fun times together. It was really great family bonding. He always wanted us to get into martial arts, and by us, I mean me and my brother. But, we were very involved in sports. We played basketball, football, baseball, especially baseball. Me and my brother were obsessed with baseball. I didn't really start training martial arts until I was 10 years old. When I was maybe about 5 or 6, I briefly did Okinawan karate under Sensei Benavides. My brother trained there too. I was too young to really remember anything, but I just remember that I really enjoyed the training. As a kid, I was completely consumed by cartoons, anime. I loved shonen anime, martial arts anime that had tournament arcs. I was a Toonami kid. I grew up in that generation where Toonami had all these anime that were dubbed into English. So I grew up on Inuyasha, Yu Yu Hakusho, Dragon Ball Z and Dragon Ball especially. That series had a big influence on me. So I would watch those obsessively on Toonami. You learn a lot actually about that warrior spirit training within martial arts, that you kind of have to keep that mentality throughout your training if you want to stay hard, stay tough, stay mentally strong. So I loved watching those shows, and I also was really into Power Rangers, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, but also on Cartoon Network with just American TV shows. I loved watching Jackie Chan Adventures, and I loved watching shows like Shaolin Showdown. There was even another one called Shuriken School that I watched a lot. So I always loved martial arts, cartoons, and anime, and all of that. The series that really inspired me to get into martial arts in the first place was Avatar: The Last Airbender. And that show, it came out in 2005. I started martial arts in 2006. So there's a very short span of time between being exposed to that show and taking martial arts lessons. That show to this day probably is the most impactful series on my life. And I've consumed a lot of media. I work in film, you know, I've studied a lot of great films and great television series, but Avatar had an incredible impact on my life. You know, the teachings that it had, it got me into martial arts. It was really incredible. And it was a way for me, my brother, and my dad to bond. You know, my dad really loved the show as well. And it was one of the first cartoons that were out there that really had a good portrayal of culture, of different cultures, and of martial arts. There's a particular scene in, I believe, the second episode. Zuko had Aang in his bunker. Aang was trying to escape. Zuko kind of confronted him and tried to catch him. Aang was doing that Bagua type circle walking on Zuko's back, and Zuko couldn't catch him. I thought that was the coolest thing, that Aang knew this style that no one else knew. He stood out for being different in what I thought was a really cool way. So it kind of stuck with me. You know, at 10 years old watching that, I wanted to stand out for being different, but in a very positive and unique way. And I felt that martial arts would do that. And that was kind of the catalyst for me wanting to do it. So at 10 years old, Avatar inspired me to want to try and find a martial arts studio to train in. My mom saw that in the summertime, we weren't doing the summer league of baseball, and we were kind of just being lazy at my grandparents' house, and my mom doesn't like that. She doesn't like us just sitting around, especially we're kids, you know. She wants us to be active and busy. So one day, she picked us up from my grandparents' house in Costa Mesa. She drove to what is now the Seiwa Market on Harbor and Geisler. So she drove right there, and now it's a Seiwa, now it's a Japanese grocery store, but it used to be the grand opening of a martial arts dojang. She goes inside, I see her, she meets this white dude, shakes his hand, talks to him for a few minutes, signals me and my brother to get out of the car. We get out of the car, we shake his hand, and we go back in the car, and she's like, I signed you guys up. That next Monday, I started training there. That school is actually brand new. It was a school that had just opened. There was paint on the windows that said grand opening. This was probably June or July of 2006. So I was pretty young at the time, but I was enthusiastic about training. So the style of this martial arts school is Kuksul Kwan. And Kuksul Kwan is a Korean martial art that is actually relatively new. It was established after World War II, kind of a mixed martial art. It's a mix between its base, which is Hapkido. So many other Korean martial arts come from Hapkido. Hapkido is kind of like the grandfather of modern Korean martial arts. So Kuksul, it's a mix between Hapkido, Shaolin Kung Fu, some remnants of Korean Royal Court martial arts, and it has things like meditation, we learn weapons. So it's an extremely versatile martial art that I absolutely loved training from the get-go. I initially had my first arc of training from 10 to about 14 years old, so about 4 years roughly, I was there training. It was truly my first martial art. You know, I was training there a few days out of the week with my brother. My dad eventually joined, and he used it as an excuse to spend time with me and my brother, and those are really amazing times as well. My instructor was 28. He was a very skilled martial artist. His name is Master Mike Dunchok. One of the best martial artists that I have ever been exposed to in my life. One thing that I gauge people that are very high level in martial arts is by versatility. You know, it's one thing just to know how to kickbox or just to know how to trick and do flips or be good at forms, but to put everything together, to have the base of martial arts, which is fighting, having the fighting ability, but on top of that, also having understanding of martial arts history, qigong, weaponry, forms, all the different aspects of martial arts, and even teaching. Mike Dunchok has so many of those skills. He learned from Master Ha Mongil, who is a Kuksul Kwan master from South Korea that taught the South Korean Special Forces martial arts. He started his own style of martial arts called Salsu Kyuktugi, He taught his students kickboxing, which he also called kyuktugi. This type of training significantly helped his students develop fighting abilities. Master He is very old school and trained his students very hard. One of those students being my master. So when we were training, we trained hard too. We learned how to kickbox, learned how to grapple, we learned some submissions, but we also learned weapons, we also learned forms, we learned how to be graceful in that way. We were taught meditations, taught quite a bit on philosophy and spirituality. So it was an extremely well-rounded martial arts education, and I absolutely loved it. And speaking of Grandmaster He, he would show up to our belt tests, which were kind of like ceremonies. Our tests were very intense. We were pushed to our limits, even as kids. And Master He was very intimidating and very hard on us. He made sure to really test us during those belt tests. So it was a very memorable experience for me, and it really helped me grow as a martial artist. So I trained in Kuk Sool from about 10 to 14 years old. And around the time when I was 14, my family was going through some changes, and we decided to take a break from Kuk Sool for a little bit. Kuk Sool also relocated from Costa Mesa to Irvine, and I'm actually in the current Irvine location. This is the spot that he's been at longer than he was at the one in Costa Mesa. But the original one in Costa Mesa will always have a special place in my heart because I think of all the people that I trained with. I think of the potential for a lot of the people that I grew up training with. I think of my friend Sean, Davis, my brother Nico, Tina, and Dan. They eventually got their black belt there. And I mean, so many other people. I reconnected with Red, who was an extremely motivated and talented martial artist that trained with me as well. So I just had a lot of really, really good memories training there. And I was happy and honored to train alongside a lot of those amazing people that had great potential in the martial arts. By the time I was 14, I had my brown belt in Kuk Sool. The style was difficult. I failed 4 tests. It was all due to not being able to break boards because we weren't breaking those like Taekwondo demo boards. We had to break just wood he got from Home Depot. So it was pretty difficult. We'd break the board, and a lot of times at tests, he'd want some of us to break a half a board, which is a lot more difficult, and a lot of students couldn't do it, but some did, some thrived. The training slowed down a little bit in my high school years. I ended up only being able to train in the summer times at Kuk Sool, but during those years, I got my red belt, which I was very proud of. After I graduated high school, I dedicated 9 months with one of my close friends and Marshall brothers, Dan Bucati, in preparing for our black belt test. In 2015, at age 19 years old, I received my first degree black belt. One thing I often think about when reflecting on my black belt testing experience is how much more meaningful it would have been to have tested alongside all of the talented martial artists that I grew up training with in this Kuk Sool dojang. So at 14 years old, I was on a little bit of a break from training martial arts. But I had a friend at my middle school that was training kickboxing, and the gym was right next to where I went to middle school. So there was one day at our middle school, we had an event. I believe it was like a Veterans Day program, and me and my friend, we had already graduated from the middle school. We kind of just came back for the event, but you know, we got bored after being there for a while, so we ended up going to where the kickboxing gym is, or looking for it. And I told him, I said, hey, I heard there's a kickboxing gym around here, let's check it out. I finally found it. It was on Grace Lane and Baker Street, behind this drive-through liquor market. So I went there, and when I went inside, this space was massive. It used to be a paint factory. It was an insanely huge space. I went in there, I met one of the owners, Gina Sahagan. She showed us around, and the next week I came back there with my dad to start training. So a little bit of background on that gym, it's called South Coast Martial Arts. My dad used to call it martial arts heaven. It was a beautiful spot for the martial arts community because it was one gym where people from so many different martial arts backgrounds came to train their respective arts. And that made a really big impression to me. I was exposed to a lot. The gym was owned by Gina and Joaquin Sahagan. They were martial artists and kickboxers as well. Joaquin was also a high-level Kempo karate practitioner. He comes from a straight line from Ed Parker. He learned from Bob White. But the unique thing about this gym was how many different programs they had going on. They had a cardio kickboxing program in the middle, in the center of a gym. It had 40 bags, excellent bags for kickboxing. There was a ring and an area that was more specifically catered towards boxing. So there was professional boxers there, amateur boxers there that were training. Right when you walk in the gym, sort of to the left side, there was a jiu-jitsu school. Joe Morera had a jiu-jitsu school there, and then his student, Legacy, ended up teaching there as well. There was puzzle mats, these blue puzzle mats with like a red outline of red puzzle mats, and that went all the way down. It was a big space, and that's where they had their wushu program. They had a Kempo program where they taught Kempo, and there was even a Polynesian dance school that was within that. You could hear music from the Polynesian dance group, which kind of would pump you up. You'd hear the drums and everything. There's people training hard in the cardio kickboxing class. There's boxers sparring in the ring. There's jiu-jitsu guys rolling. And there was another small space with wrestling mats. There was a program for kids where this guy, Joey, shout out to you, Joey, he would teach MMA for the kids there. So there was just so much going on. I met a lot of people at that gym. A lot of pretty big names, I would say, in the martial arts world. Gina and Joaquin have a son named Philip Sahagin, and Philip is a very skilled martial artist. Philip had boxing and kickboxing training. I believe he competed too. He ended up really dedicating himself to Kung Fu. He had gone to China. He spoke fluent Chinese. He knew the monks at Shaolin Temple. He still has trips where he invites people out to come with him. They go to Shaolin Temple, they train. He's really good at weapons. He was known for the bullwhip. He was incredible at the bullwhip. Just an incredible martial artist, and really had the attitude, the spirit, and the mindset of a martial arts master. He trained his students very hard. He used to do these summer camps that were open to the public, and he would invite Shaolin monks and Kung Fu masters to come teach, MMA guys, BJJ guys. If you went and you trained there, you were exposed to a bunch of martial arts. I didn't ever went to the camp, but I had heard from friends that in that camp, Philip would push you a lot. You would go to the track at Orange Coast College, and you would do drop stance for a mile, those wushu drop stances, and it's pretty intense. That type of training really breeds warriors. Philip was there, and obviously he had a major influence on the gym, and now, today, he has his own gym called K-Star in Las Vegas. And Gina and Joaquin, they live in Vegas now too. I was fortunately able to visit Philip, Gina, and Joaquin in Las Vegas and train at the K-Star Academy. It was a really fun trip. I really loved how Philip designed his classes, his curriculum. The training space was really incredible. So I'm very fortunate to have trained there. I'm happy to see that Philip's vision came into fruition. I remember when we were packing up and getting ready to move out of South Coast Martial Arts, I asked Philip what his plans were, and he told me that he was gonna work for Cirque du Soleil and he was gonna open up his own academy. So as far as my experience at that gym, I had trained boxing, kickboxing, and some Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I ended up meeting a Cambodian guy named Tu Win Hang. He had this boxing class that he would run on Thursday nights. I was doing a back kick, and Tu Win was trying to correct me. He came from a Taekwondo background, so he saw my kicks and he was giving me some pointers. My dad talked to him more. He said he was teaching boxing, and my dad always wanted to learn boxing. So me and my dad started training boxing under Tu Win. For about 2.5 years, we did boxing. He also taught us kunkumai kickboxing. Tu Win taught us for free for 2.5 years out of the goodness of his heart. He's an amazing guy. Everyone knew him as Coach Tu Win. I used to always watch his demo reel because he's another example of a very versatile martial artist. Excellent Taekwondo skills, competed and was just a beast. Excellent boxing skills, excellent kickboxing skills, but also was an acrobat. He had good gymnastics. He had trained wushu. He even did some ballet. He was just so versatile and so technical. Really made an impact on me as a martial artist. And his style of teaching was very interesting. Coach Tu-Win was all about fundamentals and technique. He didn't really push us too much cardio or conditioning wise. He believed we needed to do that on our own. He just wanted us to know the basics and to master the basics. So I got extremely good at boxing basics from him, and I'm very grateful. And Tu-Win is family to me now. I call him my uncle. I teach kickboxing now, and I had him come to my class. I love that guy to death. I know he's watching, so I love you, Tu-Win. That was a really important part of my martial arts journey. But also, while I was there at South Coast Martial Arts, I did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu under Joe Moreira's school. My coach was Legacy. I was there about 6 months, and I really enjoyed it. I had the foundation in grappling from the Hapkido training that I had before in Kuksul Kwan. And I was able to just really expand the grappling knowledge with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and I absolutely love that. So I did that about 6 months, and Legacy now teaches in Anaheim at Spider Muay Thai. He's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu coach over there. In the boxing area, you had Raul Franco and Bobby Chavez, who were former pro boxers that are coaches. Bobby Chavez has Bobby's Boxing now in Laguna. I had another former pro boxer, this Japanese guy that everyone called Mac Miyagi because he looked like Mr. Miyagi. He really looked like Mr. Miyagi, but he would train a lot of the pro boxers at that gym. So it was really cool seeing him as well. Let's talk about another martial artist who I met at South Coast Martial Arts who has had a massive influence on me, and that is Dy Sao. Dy was actually originally from Cambodia and came to the US as a refugee. He grew up on the east side of Long Beach during a time where there was gang wars and a lot of racial tensions, so he had to learn how to defend himself. He was unable to afford martial arts lessons as a kid, so instead he taught himself martial arts through watching martial arts movies. His dad would even go to karate schools and just watch the class, try to memorize the movements, and then come back and try to teach them to Dy. Dy eventually enrolled in a wushu school. I believe it was Southern California Wushu Academy, and within a few years, he thrived and he became one of the best wushu competitors in that school. And on top of that, he was able to make the US national team. He was known for the broadsword and the bow staff. Dy was always athletically inclined and his movements were incredible. At South Coast Martial Arts, when I would see him spar people, when I would see him train on his own, especially when he was training on his own, it was like he was in his own world. And I just loved watching his movement. It was pretty incredible. I had never seen someone move like that before. Dy had this extensive wushu background and even competed on a show in China called K-Star. And the fascinating thing about that show is that that's where he met Philip, because Philip was also competing on it. Philip's gym now is named K-Star as well. So they met there, and then Dy started teaching at South Coast Martial Arts. Dy was also a good friend of my boxing coach Tu-Win, because they both grew up in Long Beach together. They went to the same high school, and they were even on the same demo performance team called Flung Dung. He was an incredible martial artist. I really looked up to him in that way. Towards the end of our journey there at South Coast Martial Arts, I ended up becoming a lot closer with him, and I was his sparring partner. We were sparring partners for years, and in fact, we did a type of technical sparring that we just called like flow sparring, which is we just had MMA gloves and a mouthpiece, and we were able to do so many different martial arts techniques. I was able to really express myself. What I learned through doing that type of sparring was that it was actually more productive than doing hard sparring, which I was used to doing in the past. This type of sparring allowed me to be a lot more creative. And on top of that, it also allowed me to try new techniques and new things that really leveled me up. And why was I so comfortable trying them? Because if I made a mistake and he countered, I knew that he wasn't going to hurt me with a strike. So since there wasn't that massive consequence, I was able to practice new martial arts techniques. So it completely leveled me up, and he even helped me get better at doing jumps and flips, because he would have us do jumps after sparring when we were exhausted and too exhausted to actually care about how much fear we have doing the jump, and we were more relaxed, so it's easier to get more air. So it was a really interesting method of training that he had, and DY has always had fascinating methods of training. Outside of being his sparring partner, I was able to train with him in a lot of different ways. I did a type of forms training with him over the years where we would get a group of people that all had different martial arts backgrounds. We would do sections of movements, kind of like in wushu, but these sections of movements would be from various martial arts because we all had a different martial art background. And then at the very end of the training session, we would put all those movements together into a form, which was just incredible training because it taught you to not only be creative, but to get out of your comfort zone and move in a different way, because you had to move in a style that you had never trained before. It was incredible training, and it was kind of a really good modality for getting better at film fighting because we were able to change shapes, change energies, change tempos on a whim by switching to different martial arts styles. So it was pretty incredible. So I did that with him, and DY has dedicated his life and his career to martial arts and martial arts action cinema. And as a result, he starred in a lot of movies. Throughout my film journey, I was able to be in a lot of his films. I was in his film Hanuman. I was in his film Bangkok Dog, and we recently did a film in Thailand that will be coming out in about a year. I've learned so much from DY. I truly consider DY to be one of my martial arts masters. He has taught me so much as a martial artist, as a film fighter, even as a person. And he's been a good mentor for me as well. I'm honored to call him my friend. We spent a lot of time together. We would go eat Korean barbecue all the time and just talk about whatever, philosophy and life. And it's really been a pleasure this whole time getting to know him and to work with him on these films. South Coast Martial Arts was also where I first met the EMC Monkeys. The EMC Monkeys, I guess you could call them a stunt team. It's more of a brotherhood, but it's a brotherhood of martial artists from different martial arts backgrounds. These guys really knew how to express themselves as martial artists, and they were truly versatile. They knew Taekwondo and boxing, and they were incredible acrobats, and they were all collectively trying to make it in the film industry, so they would do demos and performances and auditions, and a lot of them ended up going pretty far within the film industry. A lot of them still work as stuntmen. Some of them have gotten fight coordinator and stunt coordinator jobs. So they're still considered legends within that sort of martial arts stunt world. And I used to watch their videos all the time, and for the first time I had saw them at South Coast Martial Arts when I was about 14 years old. I saw the legendary Zin Wuku, who made probably the first viral video of someone doing what we now call parkour. It wasn't even called parkour at that time, but it was called Urban Ninja. And Zin, this whole time I thought he was somewhere else in the world, but when I saw that video, he was like in Main Place Mall. I live in Orange County, so he was actually close. And it was crazy that one day I'm just at the gym and I see him there along with the rest of that team. So seeing them train was really interesting. They were almost like militant the way they trained. They did conditioning. They were very well organized with how they trained. And those guys influenced me a lot, when I was training martial arts and especially getting into film. And about that gym is the amount of talent that was there of people training different martial arts, different styles, and everyone was just so cool. I remember my good friend Vinay, who has his own kickboxing school in Georgia now, and he's killing it. So I'll get into it more in the next part of the series, but a big part of my experience at South Coast Martial Arts was training my own students who were some of my best friends from my high school. We had so many amazing memories there, and I really was able to experience what life was as a coach, as an instructor in the martial arts. Unfortunately, South Coast Martial Arts did close, and a lot of the members went their own ways and started their own martial arts schools, but I still keep in touch with a lot of the members there, and I am eternally grateful for my experience. So, as a teenager in high school, I had that boxing, kickboxing, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu experience, as well as being a brown belt in Kuk Sool Kwan. So martial arts was my life. It's still so crucial to who I am as a human being. At about age 16, I started teaching martial arts to my friends in my high school in Santa Ana. I had friends that were interested in learning. I wanted to get experience teaching. I thought it would be cool. I always had ideas of how I would train people differently. So I just started training my friends at my high school, and originally I was training them at my grandparents' house. You know, one of the houses I grew up in, and my grandparents had a playground style basketball court. It was a half court, and I would train my friends in boxing there. I trained and sparred with a lot of guys from my high school. It was actually good training because some of them didn't have the best control. So mouth guard, gloves on, you know, I get to test my boxing skills and they throw hands at me. So it was a pretty good experience. And some of those guys that I trained then, like Fernando Aguilar, Josiah Leyva, John Godinez, Josh Horta, I still keep in touch with to this day. And as far as Josiah and Fernando, I still train with them to this day. And I still teach them some stuff, and they teach me things too. One thing that I always struggled with when I was training in traditional martial arts and my kicks were getting really good was as soon as we got into close range striking, I really struggled. In fact, I used to turn my back away a lot in sparring, which is a big no-no in fighting. So as an experiment, I taught my students a close range striking system in boxing first before I even taught them kicks, because I figured that boxing would teach them a lot of fundamentals and principles that they will be able to apply to so many different martial arts styles. Boxing teaches you how to take a hit, but also hit someone else. It teaches you how to protect your head, protect your body, basic defense, basic footwork, basic movement, and you could get really comfortable sparring, pressure testing your style, and fighting in close range. From there, you can learn kicks, grappling, etc. I trained those guys at my grandparents' basketball court, but I eventually trained them at South Coast Martial Arts. After my grandfather passed away, my grandmother sold her house, so we had to find a new place to train, and we ended up training at South Coast Martial Arts. So not only was I training there at that gym, but I was now coaching my students there as well. And I taught them for free as well. I think that's worth mentioning. I believe that a huge part of leveling up as a martial artist is teaching. I think if anyone takes martial arts really seriously and they've been training for a while, it doesn't have to be super formal, but get some experience teaching. You will learn way more about martial arts through teaching. I trained them at my grandparents' backyard, then at a friend's house in Santa Ana. I trained them at South Coast Martial Arts for a while. We trained together at LA Fitness. We trained at Stefan Tapua's Polynesian Dance Studio. So we always had a space. We had trained at parks. We trained at a lot of different places. So we still kept our, what we would just call Friday boxing tradition, because it was always on Fridays. And I still meet with my student on Friday and we work out together. We work out at the LA Fitness. It's not so much coaching anymore, we just train together. I gained a lot of insight as a result of teaching martial arts for so many years. I learned that friendship has to come first. I don't own my students. I don't look at it in a way that I'm their master and they have to do whatever I say. They can train with me as long as they want to train with me. They can train with someone else. It's all up to them. But that friendship is what's the most important thing for me. And this is the way I've been able to really maintain long-term friendships with these people. Teaching martial arts has allowed me to understand the mechanics and movements behind these different martial arts styles on a deeper level. I was able to understand boxing a lot better by teaching boxing because I have to revisit all of these movements that I once learned And by finding a way to articulate and explain how the technique works, it actually allows you to understand the technique on a much deeper level. Within the context of martial arts, my relationship with my students has changed quite a bit over the years. For example, when I was first working with them, those first few years, I was their coach. I was teaching them from the ground up, the basics of boxing and then kickboxing. But when I was preparing for my Kuksul Kwan black belt test, these students of mine ended up becoming my training partners, and I used them as sparring partners. I used them as people to help me get me ready for this test. Also, as the years have gone on, I've learned martial arts from some of my students. For example, my student Fernando is a coach now, and there's been plenty of times that I've invited him over to come and train with me, and he showed me combos and movements that have helped me understand the art form better. What I really love about my students is how open-minded they are. When I wanted to switch my training from combat sports to more film and stunts, that they adapted with me. And in fact, I was able to do a few fight scenes with my own students. The interesting thing is that the LA Fitness that we would meet at, we just treated it like our own dojo, like our own training space. And I did fight choreography there. I did combat sports training there, including sparring. We made it work. One thing that I would impart on any of my students that I'm teaching is just to be open-minded within the martial arts. People are often too close-minded. I think it is very important to always have respect for all martial arts, all ways of moving, and be open to implementing these movements and patterns from different styles into your own style, into your own game. Being open-minded in the martial arts was crucial for me becoming a stuntman and a martial arts action actor in the film industry. Growing up, me, my brother, and my dad watched so many martial arts movies, and it was complementary to our training. I grew up in the late 90s and early 2000s, and I was first exposed to Jackie Chan when he first started breaking into the Hollywood scene. I grew up with the Rush Hour trilogy that are still classic movies to this day, but I also grew up with Shanghai Noon and Shanghai Nights, as well as movies like The Medallion and Rumble in the Bronx. As I delved more into martial arts action cinema, I began to watch a lot more of Jackie's older films. These are the films that made him famous in Asia. These were the films that he made in Hong Kong that really stood out in the martial arts world. Some of the films that I absolutely loved from Jackie's early days were the Police Story movies, Drunken Master and the Legend of the Drunken Master, Project A and its sequel, My Lucky Stars, and Twin Dragons. Jackie Chan had such a unique way of presenting martial arts through action comedy in film. He is a true legend. He is one of the best martial artists, action actors, and stuntmen on the planet. Every martial arts action star has a different skill set that they bring to the table. I remember Jet Li was just an incredible performer, and a lot of that was attributed to his high-level wushu background. I loved a lot of Jet Li films. My favorite Jet Li film was Fearless. That was one that I've watched multiple times, and I just love the story, the cinematography, and the fight scenes. I also loved films like Once Upon a Time in China, Fist of Legend, and Hero. Donnie Yen is another legend that I have followed quite a bit over the years. He has been famous for a long time in the martial arts world. He had famous movies that were absolutely incredible, like Iron Monkey in the 90s. He was known for having incredible kicks and excellent wushu. What I love about Donnie Yen is how much he's been able to express himself through different movements within the martial arts, through different styles within the martial arts. When he did Ip Man, he wasn't able to portray any of his kicks that he's famous for. Rather, he had to depend solely on Wing Chun movements, with his own flair, of course. He pulled off that character seamlessly, and what I love about Ip Man, especially the first one, and a few other martial arts films that are iconic is that often what makes a really amazing martial arts movie is not only the fight scenes being on point, but also a good story and a larger than life story. If you take a movie like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, it's about forbidden love. That's the theme, and people can relate to stories like that, but while that theme and that story is being told, you are entertained with incredible martial arts, which just enhances the story. One of my favorite Donnie Yen films was Flashpoint. What I loved about Flashpoint was he was able to implement mixed martial arts moves in an action movie, and he pulled this off better than any fighter could ever pull it off. Oftentimes fighters really suck at film fighting, and there's so many reasons as to why, but Donnie was able to take these various moves and techniques from mixed martial arts and implement it into Flashpoint. As I mentioned before, my big draw for getting into martial arts was wanting to stand out for being different, but in a very cool and unique way. The films in martial arts cinema that really caught my attention were often the ones that were innovative and unique. Most good martial arts films were coming out of Hong Kong, and they were mostly inspired by various kung fu styles. It was absolutely incredible to see someone like Tony Jaa make it onto the scene in movies like The Protector and in Ong Bak, where he doesn't do kung fu or any of these East Asian styles, rather he is doing Muay Boran. There were movies like The Raid that portrayed other Southeast Asian martial arts styles like Silat. The way they shot these movies, as well as the way the actors and stuntmen performed, were completely unique, and I was inspired by it. Not only was I inspired by the action stars in martial arts cinema, but I was also inspired by my teachers and my peers. By the time I was 20 years old, I had already known a lot of martial artists that were in the film industry. By this time, I had already known Dy Sao for years, and he had been starring in his own films as well as working in the industry. The EMC Monkeys were a huge inspiration for me getting into stunts and into creating my own projects as well. Also along the journey, I've been continually inspired by Martial Club. I love their projects. I was fortunate enough to be a part of a lot of them, and I love their training, their work ethic, and their warrior spirit. Even my Kuksul Kwan master Mike Dunchok had some experience in the film industry. When I was a kid, I remember he was always going back and forth from LA for auditions. He even had an action scene in his friend Emilio's movie Fierce Target. I found out that his teacher, Grandmaster Hum Gil, even worked in the film industry in Korea, working on some action movies. He was also friends with Master Hwang In-shik, who is famous in Hong Kong cinema, especially for his role in Young Master fighting Jackie Chan. I started getting into stunt work around 20 years old. When you're trying to get into stunts in this martial arts action film industry, you have to realize that you're going to be doing a lot of free work for those first few years. The idea is that through getting this experience from doing these projects, you're starting to build a resume, you build a wider network, maybe meet some stunt coordinators as well as other performers and directors, and hopefully you get hired onto projects with bigger pay and have better opportunities. When I first started, I was enthusiastic and eager to get involved with as many projects as I could. Something I would advise any stunt performer is to put out your own projects that you create with your friends and peers within this industry. When you do this, you have full creative control of the stories that you want to tell, as well as the type of choreography that you want to display. When you create your own projects, you often wear many hats. You learn how to operate a camera and shoot action, which is a valuable skill. You learn how to direct. You learn how to act. You learn how to be a lead, or you learn how to be like a goon and stunt performer, a bad guy that is losing in the scene, and you have to sell it in order to make the lead look convincingly superior to you in terms of their skill sets. I continue to put out my own projects with my friends,
And over the years, I've learned so much. My editing has gotten way better. My sound design has gotten better. And like I mentioned before, I learned how to direct. I learned how to choreograph. I learned how to be the camera operator. And I learned how to be a lead. I was fortunate enough that my good friend Alan Bowie was down to be the camera operator and shoot all of these fight scenes that I was doing as I was trying to make it in the industry. The first few projects that I put out were just fight scenes with no story, where me and good friends of mine, often just students, were doing choreography, and I just wanted to display my arsenal of martial arts techniques, choreography, knowledge, and really put that on screen. One of the cooler projects that I did early on was a project called Dojang Duel, and that was a fight scene I did with my good friend Ray Yao, who I met on a set of another film. We became good friends, and we ended up doing this fight scene in my original martial arts studio that I trained in, where I got my black belt in the Kuk Sool Kwan dojang. It was a fun fight scene where we got to do different sequences of choreography with different weapons. I'm also very grateful that we shot on such an amazing camera. It was shot on the Ursa Mini, which is really cool. It gave it a professional look. JD was the director of photography, and Corey was the PA, and he did the sound for that shoot. I'm just very grateful that they volunteered their services. They did this for free. They really made the whole filming process fun and exciting, and I'm still happy that I knocked out that project. I really enjoyed working with my very talented friend Ian Oh, who is an actor from Korea and martial artist. I was very honored to be able to do projects with him. I did a fight scene with him just in a parking structure. And then when I wanted to do my passion project, The Blue Spirit, he played one of the main villains in the short film. The Blue Spirit essentially is a love letter to what inspired me to get into martial arts, which was Avatar: The Last Airbender. I wanted to create an amazing short film that had incredible action, but wasn't so corny that trying to translate an animated show into live action just looks weird. You know, I wanted it to look more organic and natural, so I took Zuko's Blue Spirit character, which had no bending, and I just did sword choreography for that. And there was no bending in this whole short film. I just wanted to have it raw martial arts weapons choreography. So, like I said, it's crucial to be able to put out your own projects, create your own content designed around the way that you want to shoot. It's perfect for developing good skills in this martial arts film industry. But another thing that is really valuable and really important is being able to have a place, to have a lab where you and your training partners can get together, shoot choreography, brainstorm ideas, exchange knowledge, exchange martial arts skills, and grow together. During the pandemic in 2020, a group of friends of mine that were very talented trickers, martial artists, breakdancers, stuntmen, we got together and we would meet every Saturday at a park, and we would go over a training that involved movements from various different martial arts styles. We all pitched in with our knowledge of what style and what background we came from, and we tried to learn from each other. And that really helped me learn fundamental movements in various martial arts styles, which directly translates to working in film, because sometimes we're on set and we need to do movements that are from a specific style, or the character has a certain personality which reflects that style. And if I only know one martial arts style, then I'm limiting my opportunities and my skill set and what I'm able to do. I'm even limiting work for myself. Learning those different styles is super valuable. But on top of that, doing choreography with my friends and putting them out, practicing editing the sounds and editing all of it, doing the choreography, empty hands with weapons, melee fights, it not only was incredibly fun, but it helped me level up immensely as a martial arts action actor, as a fight choreographer, as a stuntman. It was incredible. And a consistent 3 years, I was there every Saturday and we would train for hours. I'm talking 4 or 5 hours. So it is one of the most important aspects of my martial arts journey was training there at that park. The skills I learned at that park, I still bring with me on those sets. And the friends I made at that park, the friendships that were developed, I take those guys with me when I'm on film sets, and when they're working on projects, they take me with them. As far as projects that I worked on, I remember that very early on in my martial arts film journey, I got an acting role for a martial arts film. So I did stunts, choreographed, and acted in it. So it was a good learning experience. My good buddy Miguel Munoz also did a TV pilot as a part of his thesis at Cal State Northridge. So I did that student film of his called Freedom Fighter. It was about a guy that fought in the streets, trying to fight in a more clean way, doing MMA. I did stunts for a movie called Lazarus. I did stunts for another film called The Mercenary. One of the coolest things I was able to do was link up with Martial Club and develop that friendship and brotherhood with them as well. I've always loved their content and their videos, and I had met them years ago, but we really got close around 2017, 2018, and I was able to be a part of some of their videos. There's funny skits, those videos that they had on their YouTube, but also short films like Fist of Fury. That was one of my favorite projects I've ever been a part of. The energy being on that set was incredible. I can only imagine that it feels similar to when you were on a set with Jackie Chan and all his martial brothers that were there with him, risking their lives to create a really beautiful product. Dy starred in a series of films, and I'm very grateful that he hired me on these films. I was in his film Hanuman, where I fought him with dual katanas. I worked on a TV show pilot with him that Lyndon Hoffman was heading. I got to do stunts for his film Bangkok Dog, and I recently played a character in his most recent film, which we just filmed in Bangkok, and that should be coming out within the next year. It's always a pleasure filming with your martial arts brothers, with your teachers, your mentors, so I just feel honored to have been a part of these projects with DY. I also had some opportunities to work as a stunt coordinator, which takes a whole new set of skills. I got to be stunt coordinator for a few of Zach King Studios projects, and that was really awesome. Zach is an amazing guy, and his crew are all filled with amazing people as well, and I love working with them. I got to work on their TikTok ban video, as well as their short film for YouTube called Zach King versus Porch Pirates, where I got to perform in these projects, but I also got to choreograph and coordinate how all the action was going to go down, and I had a blast doing it. There's an awesome feature film called Dark Feathers, which has won so many awards, and I really enjoyed being a part of this project as well. I was hired on as a stunt coordinator for this project as well. I had to choreograph some fight scenes in the middle of the movie, but especially the ending fight scene, which involved a lot of katana work. So I was very happy that I spent all those months at the park training katana and doing choreography with it. That really helped prep me to coordinate this fight scene. And when it came shoot day, I had all the confidence in the world to make a good action scene. I'm currently still working on projects, putting out my own projects as well. And some of the projects that I have been a part of, I cannot talk about yet because they haven't come out yet. But a lot of exciting things have happened, and I'm very grateful for that. I want to continue to work in this film industry. I want to level up my skills as an actor, as a martial artist, film fighter, directing, editing, everything. And I hope to do this for a very long time. I really consider myself a full-time martial artist because aside from working in the film industry, I work as a martial arts instructor. I have taught kickboxing at Team Oyama for the past almost 3 years, and I also make a good portion of my living from teaching private lessons. The unique thing about me when it comes to the private lessons that I teach is that I'm able to teach a variety of skills. A lot of them are within combat sports, but then I can also teach stuff from traditional martial arts that we can apply for fighting, but also we could apply for filmmaking. So I often teach weapons and weapons forms, sword choreography, kung fu techniques to stunt performers and people wanting to learn choreography and how to move a certain way for films. I train all the time and I hope to continue training for the rest of my life. There's still martial arts styles I would like to explore and train in. I'm currently documenting the curriculum of my base martial art, Kuk Sool Kwan, with my master Mike Dunchok. I'm also trying to document a lot of his knowledge and his approach to teaching, delving a lot more into that system, into that martial art, and learning more techniques and understanding the whole style on a deeper level. I have some passion projects that I work on that are even outside of fight choreography. I interview martial arts masters that have had an influence on me, and I make documentary style interviews. So far, I've been very honored to have interviewed Sensei Benavides, my martial arts instructor, Tu Wen Hang, my martial brother, Eric Hennings, martial arts master, Philip Sahagan, and there is many more to come. That's going to be an ongoing thing for me, interviewing martial artists and instructors and stuntmen. It's something that I'm very passionate about. I appreciate everyone for listening to my journey. This project has been a labor of love for me. I always wanted to tell my story, and now I have the skills and capability to do that. Honored to have just been a part of the journey with so many amazing martial artists and amazing human beings, and I'm grateful for what martial arts has done to me as well. Thank you for watching.